Carl, it's a real honor and a pleasure to have you. We've been friends for a long time. We fished against each other. I think, if I'm not mistaken, was it the last time I saw you is when you won the last fall fly or one of your fall flies, and you won that Borsky painting like he was on acid, the orange bonefish.
Yeah. That's hanging in my granddaughter's apartment up in Gainesville right now. She fell in love with that painting, and that was a gift to her. Yeah, that was it. I think
it was the last time I saw you.
That was a while. And we also, I remember seeing you at a dinner at the Chesapeake House when they were doing some of the tournament stuff there.
It's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah.
You've always been a good pal and so humble and a voracious tournament fisherman. A lot of people don't realize that. And we'll get into that a little bit. But before we get there, since we're talking about this painting, I think after that tournament, you dedicated that win to Warren Zevon, right?
Warren Zevon, yeah, my buddy, the great songwriter who just got nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's been gone 20 years. He finally got his nomination. Because he died that year that the tournament was, and I'd blown up an eardrum or something, and I didn't get back to the funeral, so I stayed in Islamorada, and the fishing tournament was the next week, and yeah,
you dedicated it to him.
I had a book coming out that was called Skinny Dip at the time, and Warren was reading the manuscript. He was sick, obviously, and I was sending him. He says, send me some of the manuscripts, which I never do. Nobody sees the manuscripts anyway, I was sending the two, and he was reading it when he was getting sicker, and he said, he said, what's the name of the book? I said, I got no idea what the name of the book. He said, I like the name Skinny Dip. So he came up with the title for the book. So I dedicated it to him. It came out after he passed away.
Wow.
But yeah, I remember that year. It's almost like 20 years ago.
Yeah. How'd you get so close to him?
He was a fan of the novels, and he came to a book signing in West Hollywood, California one time. He brought his girlfriend, and the guy said, Warren Zevon wants to see. He had a reputation. I'm going, God, he must be pissed because I had quoted a couple of his songs in one of the novels. He just wanted to say, hey, thanks for doing that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Werewolves of London is one of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah. I hope he gets in. And then I ended up getting to write a couple songs with him. He'd never been to the Keys or saltwater, and he was just an LA rocker, so he didn't see sunlight that much. So he came down, and he wanted to go just see what it was like in the Keys, and we went fishing with John Kipp one day, and just spinning rods and
perfect.
Yes, it was, and I somewhere near up around North Key Largo somewhere, I hooked it. I said, there's a big permit. He goes, you cast? I can't see it. So I cast a crab. I gave him the crab, and it was a huge permit. It was like 35 pounds. And I have a picture of him holding up. He looked like he's from another planet. They're just different. So yeah, he wanted to find out what the Keys was all about, and it was funny to have him down there. And so he visited a couple of times, and I saw him in L.A. I was lucky. A good thing about writing novels, and you don't think about it at the time, is certain people read it that you admire. I've gotten to meet so many musicians who were just fans of the books. Jerry Garcia and Phil Lash of the Grateful Dead. Wow. And then David Crosby, bless his heart, who just passed away, and Roger McGuane, and obviously Jimmy Buffett's an old friend of mine, but that would have never happened to me if I hadn't been writing the books, because you don't think about that when you write them. You just think, well, hope somebody likes it somewhere.
Because you were working at the Miami Herald.
Yeah.
From 1985 to 2021.
1976.
Yeah.
I went in 1976.
Oh, 76 it was. Okay.
Yeah, but I started the column in 85.
Right.
So I was there a total of about 45 years.
And what were you doing in the previous years?
I was
from 76 to 85.
I was on the investigations team, and I was on the staff of the Sunday magazine that the Herald had at that time, Tropic. And then I was started out on the city desk just as a normal, any reporter, and kind of bumped my way up. So by the end, I was on the investigations team, and we just finished a big investigation in Bahamas where I know this will be shocking. There was some drug corruption at the time.
Shocking. Yeah, right.
So shocking. And so we just finished that, the managing editor said, "You want to try writing a column?" And when I applied to the paper years and years ago, I said, "Someday I want to be a columnist." They must have dug up the old application saying, "What can we do?" So that's when I started the columns. I had 85, up until 2021. So, yeah, I mean, it was. I was lucky to be at the newspaper when, the 70s and 80s in Miami, just wild.
Right. What was the most intriguing investigation that you reported?
I'll tell you the one that meant the most to me. We did a story. They were going to develop North Key Largo. The Monroe County Commission, excuse me, the Monroe County Commission had approved massive development all along what's now Cardside Road. Well, 509 comes down, and all that little drive that you have if you're not taking the stretch back from the Keys. And there was a big project called Port Bougainville that was going to be put in there, and they were going to dynamite the hammock for their marina and for lakes and water. And we got into it and found out it didn't have the proper permitting, and there was a county commissioner. He was handing out pamphlets for the pre-sales. That's how plugged in he was too. So so we just wrote about that, and the project got stopped, and it's now a state park on that road up there. And for the most part, that road still isn't developed. So it wasn't like blockbuster drug series or one of those investigations that leads to the Washington or anything, but it was a local done. Sure. Myself and Brian Duffy did it, and it was one of those times where it actually made a difference. You can write thousands of newspaper stories that just go in the bottom of the birdcage and that nothing ever happens. But this was a case where the government got involved and said, "Wait a minute, this whole thing was messed up. How did this get approved?" It was huge. It was going to be huge.
That's awesome.
It was going to look, that whole stretch was going to look like Hallandale, and it's still pretty green and nice looking. So that was one. That was called the investigation was called The Last Stand, because it was really the last part of the Keys that hadn't been touched like Key Largo. I mean, it was really that last wild stretch of the Keys. So that's the one that I was happiest with the way it turned out, I'll say.
Right. As a kid, did you always want to be a writer and an author?
Yeah.
You did as a kid?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I told this story, but my dad, I loved to write. I loved to read, and I started reading. I had two newspapers when we were growing up, the kids and I. We had the Fort Lauderdale News that arrived in the afternoon. And then the Miami Herald, which for me in the next morning, and had all the sports scores in it from my point of view. So I started reading. My mom said the first thing I ever read was the Miami Herald sports page, because I was a baseball fan. The Yankees trained in Lauderdale back then, and so. But I knew I wanted to. My dad got me a typewriter when I was 6.
Wow.
Yeah, I know and the worst part is I asked for it. I didn't just give it to me. I said,
when you were 6.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah, an old Olivia something. It was Smith. It was just a manual typewriter, and I started doing these little sports sections for our neighborhood, the kickball leagues or whatever people in the streets were playing, just writing up little sports stories when I was a kid. So I was lucky. I kind of knew what I always tell Bob Branham, who I grew up with. I said, we were two of the luckiest son of a bitches ever. We both got to grow up and do what we wanted. We always dreamed of doing. He always wanted to be a fishing guide. I always wanted to be a writer. And it's rare, as you know, when it all plays out that way.
The dream comes true.
Yeah.
Bob tells me that you wrote this article, I don't know if it's in high school or junior high school, More Trash.
Oh, yeah. It was sort of an underground newsletter on mimeograph machines, because it was the answer to the rah-rah high school. I wasn't into
rah-rah high school.
The regular school newspaper, which I just, it was more, it was supposed to be humorous, and it was supposed to take cuts at the administration, Plantation High School. Yeah.
That's what it was. But he told me, he said there was a certain code in some of your articles that would actually spell out, Coach Smith is an asshole. Right? Did you do that? That's what Bob told me.
He's got his memory. I do know that the very last one I did before I graduated, on an old typewriter, you type a letter, and then you have to go back and underline it. You have to go back in backspace and hit the underline thing, and I underlined 7 7 letters started with the word F all the way down. And I said, no one's ever going to know. And Bob figured, of course, all my friends said, you got away with that, because it was all over the Yeah, that was the high point of my level of my wit in those days, but it was sort of the farewell.
It's got to start somewhere.
It's got to start somewhere, yeah. And people loved it. It was the one thing, because it was kind of irreverent and sarcastic and satiric. The one thing I found out, I was a scrawny little kid, and I was a year younger than everyone else in my class because I'd skipped a grade. So if I was walking down the hall and there were a couple of football players, usually I was the guy that would, get the elbow or get knocked. But once the little newsletter was out there, they thought it was cool. And all of a sudden they didn't, you didn't get pushed around. They said, oh, that's so good. What are you going to write about this week? I'm like, God, I'm going to get out of high school without getting broken in half.
So your writing made you become a little popular.
I want to jump ahead real quick, and I want to come back. So now, just recently or a little bit ago, you were interviewed by 60 Minutes. Oh, so now you take a look at what the feeling of respect as a writer at such a young age, and then you're interviewed all these years later by 60 Minutes.
Yeah, that was
God.
Was a while back, Steve Croft, and yeah, I know. I thought it was a mistake when they called, but the best part of that for me was I was still living in Islamorada at the time. They don't know anything about fish. So what do you do in the afternoons? I said, I go fishing, and I had my boat. I usually just pulled around by myself. And so I went out to the Petersons, and they said, tell us where you're going to be. So I said, about 4 o'clock, I'm going to be out in the Petersons. And I was just pulling around in this flat, and they sent this helicopter with a camera crew buzzing me to get this. This is before drones,
Right, sure.
So and I mean, the water's going around. I'm trying to stay up on the platform. I mean, they just wanted this 1 10-second shot,
Right.
Yeah, I was surprised I guess I was always surprised when they wanted to talk to me. I was still obviously doing the column then, but the books have been going okay. But the PR department at the publisher is always going to say, don't say no to 60 Minutes.
For sure.
Yeah, unless you're Richard Nixon, no.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but no.
Well, let's go back to your high school days. And Bob said that you had a good friend, and he just showed me a photograph of you, Bob, and Clyde.
Yeah.
Tell me about Clyde, because he was really a dear friend.
He was like, we were like the Three Musketeers. We went snake hunting all the time, went fishing all the time, and get on our bikes. It was just bass fishing in West Broward, But we'd find these cool spots, and Clyde loved to fish too. And, I think we got to know him in junior high, and then, he had some symptoms of depression. And I remember a time when he started talking about he wanted to take his own life, and we were so worried. And he sat down with Bob's dad at the time and told his dad that. And so Bob and I kept an eye on. We'd take turns, where he is. And at that time, I just gotten my driver's license. I was just, but Bob had his, so we could go find him, and we know he's okay. He's fishing here, something. And then he was okay and my memory could be shaky, but it seemed like almost a year where he seemed all right. And we're getting the month before we were all supposed to graduate from high school. He took his own life. He drove out in the middle of as far as you could drive into the Everglades back in those days, and none of it. We've all been haunted by it because we didn't know why. Mm-hmm. He just kept saying, "I don't want to live anymore." And he was very emotionally involved with the Vietnam War. He thought it was wrong, and he was depressed about that a lot. And I was not involved enough. I knew it was bad. I knew I didn't want to go, but I still, on the weekends, I wanted to go fishing, Bob, and I would, let's do this, let's do that. And, so it was still a shock when it happened, when he passed away. And you don't ever get, I don't think, any answers, you just don't. And it's you remember where you were, when I remember Bob, I was at my girlfriend's house at the time, and I remember Bob knocking on the door, and way before cell phones. This was in 1970. And I remember him knocking on the door, and I came in the door, and I knew right away. He said, they found him.
Fuck.
Yeah, we just said, oh, fuck.
Did you bring him back to life in any of your books?
No. I'm sorry, Nikki. No, I think the spirit was the spirit. If I imagine it, if Clyde had lived to be the age that we are, he would be very much like the skink character in the novels.
That's what Bob said.
Yeah, very much like living just his own remote life, angry all the time. He was very depressed about how fast South Florida was developing, and Bob and I both were. I mean, the places we used to ride our bikes and fish were all getting paved over, and we used to go walking in these woods for hours, and they were going to be torn down and developed. And I know Clyde was very angry about that. Both of us, all of us, were angry and upset, but we also didn't know what to do. We didn't know. We were kids. We didn't know to show up at the zoning board meeting or to write a letter to the mayor. We just knew that one day, there was a canal that we were fishing, and the next day it wasn't there anymore.
Right.
That kind of thing. So Skink, that character, has that sort of renegade spirit, and Clyde certainly had that. But it's hard to know.
Yeah.
I think, and one thing you learn, and I read a lot about suicides, and especially among young people, and it still happens. And many, many times you don't have an answer. You don't know what it was. Mm-hmm. And that's the worst thing for the family and the friends and the survivors of that is you don't know, because he never articulated this is why I want to do it. I just feel the depression is an insidious thing. And at that age, I don't think I had a handle on it in terms of assessing him.
Right.
And the other thing is he wouldn't have listened to anything we said anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Tell us some stories.
Hang on one second. Branham said he may have come back in one of your books as a chick. He said if he writes about me, I might be come back as a girl.
Branham?
Yeah.
Oh, God. I haven't put Bob in any of the books. Yeah, I try to leave my friends.
But you guys had a great life in fishing. He said that you guys he had a 12-foot boat with a 6-power motor, and you sank it and all the things. You talked about, the story about Captain Dildo.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Tell me about your fishing life with Bob, because that was you guys were both connected with fishing, and it was really profound at a young age.
Yeah, I mean, I met him. We both went to Peters Elementary School in Plantation, and I met him either in second or third grade, and we just started talking. I guess I overheard him talking about fishing, and I said, I'd love to go fish. And he was a fanatical fisherman. In those days, we just used fly rods, although we used some, spinning rods. We used some fly rod for panfish and bass, but most of the time we were just, and back in West Broward, those canals were full of little tarpon back then. You could take those canals, if you portaged a couple times, all the way to the New River, and that's what we would do. We'd get up at 3 a.m, carry the boat with the engine on it, about a block to water, put it in motor putt-putt all the way. I don't know how many miles it would be from West Broward all the way to the New River. So we'd be trolling for, Rapalas for snook right behind Pier 66.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's how crazy we were. There was an old royal castle in downtown Fort Lauderdale. My dad had his office. He said, don't ever go in that place. It's open all night. There's all kinds of people in there. So Bob and I would always stop, crawl up and go get some burgers at the royal castle. And it was the greatest. We were nuts. When you think about it, we were nuts. Because we didn't have lights on the boat. I remember one time going down the 84 Canal, no lights, and a manatee surfaced right ahead. And we didn't hit him with the prop, but I was in the front of the boat. He came up, and the whole front of the boat went, whoo. And we just surprised him. He was sleeping. We didn't hit him or anything, but God, it was like, and I said, what the hell are we doing out here? We could be killed. But we were the only boat out.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
At what point in time did you head down to Florida Bay and start pulling the flats of Biscayne Bay? And
when Bob got his driver's license, he got his a few months before mine. We took the little boat. We both always wanted to bonefish. We'd seen, American Sportsman. We've read about it. We wanted to bonefish. So and my dad would take me once a year down to the Keys. I'd fish with one of the old guys, Cecil Keith or Billy or something. So we got this. We drive all the way to Crandon Park, and there's a little, like a cut-off canal, and we just parked off the road a little bit. We carried the boat down. We mowed out. We had I think he bumped up to like a 9.8 mercury at that point, which is, but it's fine, but it's heavy to carry the goddamn thing around. And our pole was a closet dowel that we bought at Lindsay Lumber on Broward Boulevard, elongated before they cut it for the closet. It was just a big, long closet dowel. And we went out there and taught ourselves how to bonefish and would work our way down to North Key Largo. Sometimes off Carey's Fort, we go there. You remember that, right?
Yeah,
because
sure.
you used to meet Bob there sometimes. I remember you coming down to fish a few times, and so that we were teaching ourselves more than anything. And then we met Bill Curtis, who for some reason, who wasn't a famously warm, a welcoming personality. He liked us for some reason, and we had a little radio. It's always kept on 16. He would call and say, "Yeah, I'm down 3 flats south. There's some fish around if you want to come down," because it was just me and Bob putting along.
That's so cool.
So he would call you down and tell you where there's fish and come over here.
Yeah,
Wow.
you say and then we would do the same for him. We did it for him many times. I remember one time he was filming an outdoor show. Bill was, and he hadn't caught anything, and he called Bob, and Bob built his own flats boat at some point. And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah. If you guys caught a bonefish, if you catch one, give me a holler. We need some footage." And of a bonefish. So I caught one, and Bob calls Bill, and the camera crew comes over, and they do this thing with the bonefish where they need a picture of a tailing bonefish. They put a sinker. The bonefish's nose is here, and he's 3 feet of water, but you put the sinker, the tail goes up. The poor thing is just like, "Let me go, Jesus." And I said, "But man, I hope they're not going to kill that poor fish." But they're taking it from all angles like it's a tailing bonefish. That's when it burst my bubble about fishing documentaries after that.
Yeah, that's so, because you know what's going on.
Yeah, we
don't
don't go this. It's poor bonefish. And then he'd put weights on his pectorals too, so that he wouldn't slide to one side. It was just hilarious.
Such staged, right?
Yeah, but I just felt like, boy, if this fish dies, that's bad karma for the rest of our lives. We're not catching another fucking bonefish ever.
So you're the reason why all those bonefish died and left. And
God, that's heartbreaking, though, to think about what happened, how it was. You remember
Sure.
how it was and how it is now.
A lot of people don't realize how great of a fisherman that you eventually became. You won 4 or 6 fall flies, one of the biggest invitational fly tournaments you can enter. You won 6 of those. You won 4 all tackles, and one of them you won on fly only.
Yeah.
You were right in the middle of the thick of the halcyon years of fly fishing in downtown Islamorada.
And I would like to think that all of us who fished, and you fished then, that we all knew how good it was. I mean, there'd be years where there was bad weather and the tournaments would kind of suck, But just overall, as many big fish as you saw, I still think part of me knew that this isn't going to last forever. And so I think I appreciated it at the time, but I had no idea or no interest in tournaments until Tim Klein called me. I was living in Tavernier at the time, and he said he had a cancellation for the fall fly. "Do you want to fish a tournament?" I said, "I've never fished a tournament. And I don't know these guys, these are the best bonefish anglers in the world." He said, "Come on, you can do it. I've been fishing with you." So it was like, I want to say 94, 95 was the first time. And I was scared. I mean, it was intimidating. All these guys, these veteran anglers, and all the best guides are there, But we had so much fun. We didn't win that year, but we did pretty well. I think we won the fly division because not many people were fishing with fly rods, and that was our thing. So, you get more points for a fish if you catch it on fly. And including the release points were a little bit more. So he had the strategy. He did the math. He did whatever he told me to do.
why didn't you ever fish with Bob Branham in those tournaments?
Bob usually had old clients that he had, and he was fishing Biscayne Bay every day. He didn't always come down to Islamorada for those tournaments. He did tarpon season,
Right.
But he didn't always come down for the bonefish tournaments because he was booked solid in Biscayne Bay. And the truth is, the fishing up there was spectacular.
Yep.
So I did end up fishing one spring fly tournament with Bob, and we didn't do very well. But when I was living down there, he had a cancellation, and I wasn't getting to fish with him very much. He was busy. I was writing,
Sure.
and so for me, I got to fish 3 days with Bob, so that was worth it. We didn't need to win anything. It was just fun being on the boat with him. I haven't fished with him in about I want to say about 4 years now. And, he's not really fishing it now. And, things change, but we had some great, unbelievable memories. I've been lucky to get, I know you feel this way too. We were there at a special time, but also you got to get pulled around by legends, people.
Absolutely.
I went fishing with Bill Curtis and caught I remember he said, well, there's some permit out there. And I said, Bill, I'm not a real good permit fisher. He says, you've never tried. And he had a fly that he cut out of a Quaker oatmeal box. Have you ever heard of these flies?
No.
There was the top lid of the Quaker oatmeal box was heavy cardboard. And Curtis would cut out a crab body and attach legs to it and put some kind of, I don't know, fingernail polish. It was a cereal box. He said, trust me. I said, all right. And we were on, there comes a permit, eats it. I'm going, what the fuck? Quaker. There's guys sitting there pulling their brains out, trying to tie crab patterns. We just throw
I mean, what was he thinking when he looked at that Quaker box? I'm going to make a permit fly out of it. Thing.
But they're such great memories. But I got to be in the boat with him, and I got to know Bill. And these are just, in my childhood, that was the equivalent. It would be the equivalent of getting batting lessons from Willie Mays or Mickey Mantle.
Yeah.
I mean, and Bob and I both, we thought of those old pioneers of bone fishing. They were almost our sports heroes. So when you finally got to meet him, we finally got to hang with Billy Knowles. It was like, wow. I mean, that was a celebrity thing.
I remember the first time I fished a slam in Key West, and I'm walking through the lobby, and I'm seeing these guys, and I'm like, I want to point at them. There's so-and-so, there's so-and-so. But you eventually spent a lot of time with Steve Huff and still do.
Yeah.
Tell me about fishing with him, and especially I want to hear about how you broke a rod on a potentially all-time world record permit.
Oh, God.
Sorry, I got to ask you the bad stuff, too.
Yeah. Well, I knew Steve. We'd been introduced, and I said, I know you're slammed. I live in Islamorada, but anytime you have any, I'd love to come to Key West permit fishing. So we got some time, and then we do it every year for 1 week. That would be my permit fishing. And I think in April, I meet him at Sugarloaf, and we leave Sugarloaf and go out. And I was catching some permit. You're with Huff, you're going to see permit, and you better catch him. But
were you nervous?
I was a little, but he was so easy to be with and so much fun. And then and I wished I had done more of that kind of fishing. He eventually left the Keys. I still fish with him in the Everglades, of course. But the big fish, oh my God! I actually did a piece. There's a book coming out that asked me to do a piece on this. But we were fishing out near, and we caught a couple fish already. So it was a great day. Your day's made. Got permit to eat. And then there's a tail, and it looks pretty big. I mean, it looks. And he said, "Go ahead. I'll take one more. Let's take one more shot at it." So the fish is going this way, and I got a sage. It's a 10-weight sage, brand new. The fucking thing eats, and I know I feel it's big, and he doesn't say anything. And I'm fine. And I said, we're not really even chasing it. It's going off into the deeper water and just getting back on the flat. And I start working at the boat. He goes, damn, that's a pretty big one. And I said, okay, and I get it up to the boat, and he takes the net. He says, all I hear from him is it won't fit in the net. And I said, what? He goes, it won't fit in the net. So, so I moved to the very, very bow, and he was at this end. And the head of the fish is, and I'm trying, I'm just trying to get the nose into, and he's trying to fit it in the net. Pow, the rod breaks. And the fish does another run. And I'm just, the rod breaks. So I've got the little stump and I'm fighting it. He just does one more run. I reel him, straight in. And Steve said, this is huge. And I said, God, it's a big fish. He goes, it's more than a big fish. And he weighed it 3 times. It was 43 pounds. It would have beat
Del Brown's record by 42.
Well, no, at the time, the record in that tip, it was Del, but it was like 38 and a half. And it was solid. And he said, well, your rod broke. We can't enter it. And I wasn't even thinking about world records. Now I feel horrible. Now I feel like shit. I just felt like an idiot before. Okay, I broke the rod. Now he's going, well, we can't put it in as a world record. And I remember it was April 1st, and I want to say 1998. April 1st, and it was April Fool's Day. Perfect for me, right? So anyway, Jan we took some pictures. We didn't even have iPhones. We took pictures with whatever cardboard stupid camera I had. And then pictures, you can see I'm holding up this big ass permit, and the fly rod's in two pieces lying on the side. Yeah, like
unfortunately, it's in the background.
So anyway, so he goes, and Steve was such a gentleman. I thought he was going to kill me. He said, it's actually a better story like this, isn't it? And he goes, and it's not a bad thing to let one of these guys go, because I'd have to kill it to take it in and weigh it. So he let it go, and we're motoring in, and he goes, wait, I got to stop. And there's a boat. It's Diego, and he's fishing with Del Brown, who has all the records, caught more permit than any living human, right? And Steve goes, stick with me on this. And he pulls up, and he pulls out onto the flat where Diego and Del Brown, hey, Steve, what's up? He goes, hey, my client just got a 43-pounder on whatever pound. And you can see Del Brown, you can see the shoulders physically sag. You can see him, the rod comes down, and then Steve gives it like 3 beats. He goes, it's all right, man. He broke the rod on it. You still got the record. He turns around, pulls off.
That's a great story.
Yeah,
awesome.
It was. It was a lifetime. I knew it. I knew it was never going to happen again. I felt bad, though. I never was... I didn't know what the world record was. I mean, I never looked.
Yeah, but you're not that guy to chase records. You just caught a big fish.
No, and I was writing so much. At that time, I was doing 2 newspaper columns a week and writing my books. So if I fished at all, I would fish at night. I would put the boat down and go out to the and pull myself around and fish for bonefish, or maybe down to the Petersons. But I wasn't. I didn't do a lot of. I should have done more fishing while I lived there, but I was working so hard.
You're busy, yeah.
And now looking back, I probably missed out on a lot of great. But I have a lot of great memories, and I got to meet these legends who became friends.
Right, for sure. And you had a great house down there.
Yes,
in Islamorada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was on Lower Matacumbi, right on the bay.
And now you live up here in Vero Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Why'd you leave the Keys?
Well, it wasn't an easy decision, and I did keep the house for a while after we left but I had at that time my stepson was about to go into high school, and my youngest Quinn was about to go start elementary school.
That makes sense.
And we just wanted some options in terms of education, and I always thought I could always drive back and forth for the fishing, but. And my stepson at the time was also learning to surf. He became a very good surfer, and there was good surf up here. And if I'm selfishly, I also was the traffic and the amount of people on the water was bringing me down. The experience of fishing had been degraded. The kind of fishing we like to do on the flats, which is really basically a solitary endeavor. It's you and the guide, and when you always have to worry about, okay, how long till a jet ski runs over this school of fish, or how long before these googans run their party barge up on it. You're going out. When it becomes nerve-wracking, it's time to find another place. And it was nerve-wracking. And this was going back. Now it's twice as bad. Mm-hmm. On the weekends, if you had a medical emergency, God forbid, and you needed to get up to the hospital from where I lived, northbound, you couldn't get on the highway.
You're toast.
Yeah, you better go by boat.
Yeah.
You couldn't get there, and it just became a practical matter. And also, I just got so discouraged being on the water and always have just somebody run over the flat.
Frustrated.
Yeah, and I wasn't big enough to fight anybody, but I got really pissed off.
Did you use your voice when you're out there?
Yeah. One time I was out by the Petersons all by myself at sunset, pulling the strip, right? Nothing had popped up yet, but it was just beautiful.
Perfect evening.
And there comes a flat skiff coming from back Twin Keys, or I don't know, somewhere, coming across. It was right across the flat in front of me. I yelled, didn't stop. I said, okay. I pulled off, threw the engine down, and I chased that son of a bitch all the way to White Marlin Beach over on Lower Matacumbi.
Wow, long ways.
Yeah, yelling at him, and he's just going. And it turned out I knew who I was. I didn't know him. He goes, I'm sorry. I said, you had the whole ocean to go around me. Why'd you run me down? And I had to use a red fisher, I think, at the time. I forget which boat, but it was fast. It was fast, especially with just me in it. and no, me and a fly rod. That's it. So there was only a little bit of it touching. I was so mad. I don't know what I was going to do when I got there because there were two of them in the boat. I was going to embarrass the shit out of them, and I yelled at him a bit, and then I went in for the night. I thought, man, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore.
Yeah, there's only so much you can take, especially if you know what it was like 20 years prior. For me, I don't have that baseline.
Yeah,
it's the only thing I know. So, but for me, it's still really great. It's still good out there. It's still great. It's crowded and there's not as many fish. But if I were to see what you guys saw 20, 30, 40 years ago, it'd be pretty upsetting to me.
Yeah, but there are places you can still go, and this
the
type
Bahamas.
I go to the Bahamas quite a bit, but
right.
but there's places you can turn up out there in Florida Bay sometimes, or in the Everglades, back around where Steve fishes.
Sure.
Where you're looking at a shoreline that looks pretty much exactly as it did 5,000 years ago, and you can still spend the day and hardly see anybody. It's still possible,
right?
But
that's why Steve is where he's at.
Yeah,
in Everglades City.
Yeah,
every day he's alone.
Yeah.
How come you still live in Florida? You've been writing against it for so long.
I know. I always use this comparison, like when you're born and raised somewhere, and you do have roots. And my oldest son and my grandkids are at school now, but they all lived in Miami. And Bob, my best friends, and all my friends in the Keys.
It's your home.
Yeah, and there are days when I feel like I got to get out of this place. But the other days I feel like if you leave, it's like sneaking out on a dying relative. It's like sneaking out of the ICU. You're saying, I'm not going to hang around for this. You got to. I think at some point, as long as there are people fighting back here, that I've got to stay.
And you've got a great, solid, profound voice that people listen to.
Yeah, I think therapeutically, it's good for me to be able to spout off and release, vent a little bit. But I don't know how much people listen. I used to think that you have to convince yourself that it has some, not impact, but you're reaching somebody, or you wouldn't keep writing the way you do. Mm-hmm. In your own soul, you've got to not think that it's all going for nothing. But sometimes driving around and you see things on the water that you just go, this can't be happening here, or this, that you just see a beautiful place. How you remember it, and when you get there, and it's like a sandbar situation. There's 60 boats and 100 drunks, and people are pissing and shitting in the water, and I remember that flat when there was nothing there.
Right.
You do. It
hurts.
It does hurt.
Yeah.
It does piss you off.
Well, let's talk about your writing a little bit. I called Tom McGuane. I said, "Can you give me a couple sentences about Carl?"
Oh God.
Only McGuane, can write. He says, "Carl Hiaasen is a great American writer, a comic genius, and a fearless journalist. He has made South Florida a world map of human folly, malicious schemes, and indifference to the common good. In his novels, there's usually a decent survivor of the milieu to remind us that it doesn't have to be this way, that there is hope, and that constant vigilance against the inane and the corrupt is indispensable tool for life in America." Right?
That's pretty high praise, but also that's what you get when you ask him for 2 cents.
And it's hard to read for you, Dad.
No, he was one of my. That's actually a lot for me to. He was one of my writing heroes when I was young, and Jim Harrison, that group. And so to be able to get to know them and be able to fish with them as I have, I just feel very lucky, Andy, because people live their own lives, and sometimes they never get to meet the people they admire or they look up to. You can't imitate Tom McGuane as a novelist. You can't even try. But the fact is that, I got all of his books, and I did at a fairly young age. It's just cool. And this is one of the great things about fishing, I think. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but the intersection of people who fish intensely, they're not professional fish. The guides are, but everyone else does something else, and you bring them together. But that one thing you have in common is you know what it's like to have a fly rod on your hand and a string of tarpon coming. There's no other feeling. There's no other high. There's nothing like it.
No.
And either you get it or you don't. And I found that now I'm a little older than you, I think. Or
I'm a little older than you by about a month.
All right. Well,
we're both turning 70.
Yeah, we're pretty close.
What's that look like?
There are days when I feel like it. I feel every bit of it. You get out of bed, you just feel, oh, this isn't,
right.
This isn't great. I should be able to have some feeling on my right side. I think it'd be normal if I could feel where my right foot was. Then other days, I think I'm very, very fortunate and lucky to be in good health. And it's, I think, a time when I do look back on a lot of the great experiences, and so many of them are on the water. So many of the friendships are on the water. Most of my good friends fish. And like I said, you either get it. It's not like an inside joke. You either get it. It's either in here or it isn't. Because you're standing out there on a bow, it can beat you to death on a long day, especially tournament. It's tense. That you're looking at the clock and
Gotta get one more.
I gotta get one more shot. Please, God, one more shot. But I think we were lucky to do that, and I think. I have one of my grandfathers lived to be 100, so you always pray that. I'm not sure I want to live to be 100. He wasn't, at the end he was saying time's up, come on.
Right.
But he just kept working, and I think that's the key, to keep doing something, and I just
keep doing great things, chase your dreams. But as regarding, I don't want to interrupt you a little bit, but I want to go back to Tom McGuane in this new film Tarpon.
Oh yeah,
that was originally produced in 1974, and they're kind of reproducing it in reflection to the guys that were down there. And I feel like you too wish we could have been there. And you're in the film, talking about these guys, and so Jim Harrison, Russell Chatham,
oh my God,
Bronigan.
Guy
Valdine, Tom, and Jimmy Buffett, and they're all writers.
Yeah,
that became tremendously successful, and they had a passion for not only the nightlife but for the poon.
Yeah, yes,
so to speak.
Yes, in any context of that word, they passion they were quite the characters. At that point when that was all happening, I was just a young reporter, and I go to Key West on a story. I'd be covering a drug story or something. So I was a little younger than they were, so I wasn't in the mix of it. But everyone knew they were there. They knew what was happening. They knew how cool it was. And Jimmy's career was really just getting rocking and rolling then. But they were all down there, and that's the thing they had in common. I don't know. It's Guy. Guy told me the story, and maybe Tom verified it, that they would, they would drop acid and go tarpon fishing. Now, let me just. My experience with tarpon is you need your full amount of concentration. You really, a psychedelic tarpon is gonna blow you off the boat. So, right. But they would do it, and they'd see the skiff drifting out there. They'd both they're lying there, and another guy would come. Everybody okay? And they'd say, "Yeah, get out of here, go." Guy would flip them off or something, because they were just, the sky looks so beautiful. Tarpon rolling. That was quite a time. It was quite a time. They were all gifted, such gifted writers. Key West was such a magnet for that. And I wish I had gotten to go out with them and do that. But I was literally just starting my journalism career. And if you went down there, you were covering a story. It was often a hurricane. The Herald in those days, we didn't have the forecasting. So as soon as a hurricane popped up, they'd pick 8 of us, and they send us to each different part of the state just to wait. We'd be on the ground when the hurricane hit. So that meant seven of us were just there, playing with ourselves, because about an hour, and they said, no, it's hitting up, it's hitting up the state. But you're in Key West. I got to go in Key West, on a hurricane assignment. But in those days, they just scattered everybody and said, one of you is going to get hit by the hurricane. And I never got. I was never one of the ones that was there. So probably for better. But
right. When did you first? That whole scene was based on tarpon. What kind of a relationship did you have with that fish?
Well, as I mentioned, when we were kids, the only tarpon were in the drainage canals of West Broward, and they were little. If 15 pounds was a big one, they were little baby tarpon, and so we would go. Bob found out that they like to eat muddler minnows, the fly muddler minnow, which we used for bass, and but he found out. But what we didn't have a lot of resources, and we didn't have we had fly rods, but maybe not the greatest leaders. So a lot of times,
did you read the magazines by any chance back then?
Yeah, we did, but we didn't even have a tackle shop where you could go build a real leader. I mean, Bob would build the leaders, but a lot of times it'd be like 12-pound test, 15-pound test that was down to the fly. And, we'd hook them. Now, these little tarpon, of course, they break it off, or they lost most of them. But it was still fun. They'd roll around, and you would chase the rolling schools up and down, through people's yards. They didn't like it. You'd run through the yards, cast them. And then here's the other weird thing that we did. We would, if we had his boat, we would drop his boat in and just kind of putt real slow. And if we had spinning rods, we'd be trolling Rapallas or Rebels. Sometimes you get them that way, but more often than that, you go down real slow and you cut the engine off, and right in your wake, they're rolling. They would wake them up early in the morning. They'd start to roll. Right. Then you could figure out where they were and go back for them, But those were the tarpon we fished for. And then when we old enough to get driver's license and stuff, we go down to the Keys. Oh my God, yeah. I mean, one time we saved our money. And Bob had the car, and we were going to go down. We were going to actually fish with a guide. This was a big day. Half a day was all we could afford. Half a day with Billy Knowles, and it was like, I don't want to say it was like $60 or something. That's how long ago it was, right? And so we get to that, it's blowing, it's shitty, it's horrible weather, but we want to go anyway because we never get to do this. So Billy says, "All right, can either of you fly fish?" And I said, "Yeah, we both can fly fish." He said, "All right, we'll go out to the pocket."
Sun.
Yeah, sun. We'll go out to the pocket. He said, "I had a long night." And we go out, and we're no other boats are out, so we got the pocket to ourselves out there, in Islamorada, and he stakes us out. And Bob and I are standing up. Billy sits down. "I'm going to rest a little bit. And you guys can see fish fine. You don't need me to see the fish." He dozes off. Billy knows. Okay. So there weren't a lot of fish moving, but eventually Bob hooked one and jumped off. But the thing that he did, and it woke Billy up, was a fish came on the other side of the boat, and Bob can cast with both hands. He's ambidextrous. So he switches to his left hand. Billy's looking kind of up. He goes, "Son, you do that on purpose?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Show me again." He was all interested. And so he had Billy up, the both of them doing it. We didn't catch any fish. We were home at, the dock at like 12:01, right?
Half day.
Half day. Yep. Here we had, but that was the big thing we got. But it was still, we got to fish with Billy Knowles. We were happy.
Right.
This late 70s?
It might have been, let me think, maybe early 70s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How come you never fished tarpon tournaments?
Well, at that point, I was doing 2 bonefish
You're
tournaments.
just busy.
2 weeks, and I didn't have enough time to take off because that's a commitment, those 5-day tournaments, because you want a couple practice days and all that. And so I was kind of focused on bonefish. I love tarpon fishing, and Tim and I did a lot of tarpon fishing, but I felt that if I added that in there, it would break up when I'm writing. It would just, they come pretty quick. I kind of wish I had, but I mean, at other times, it was nice to go out there in a leisurely way and fish for them, because I felt that there was a lot more high-octane testosterone floating around the tarpon tournaments than the bonefish tournaments, because they're bigger fish. The Calcuttas were bigger, and I just, I knew people that fished them, angler friends of mine, that didn't have a very good time. And they were pretty good anglers, but they just felt there was always a fight. Somebody was always, there was always a little war,
there's more tension.
Soap opera drama going on, who's in what spot. And I don't like fishing where I don't want to have a fight waiting back at the dock.
No, I hear you.
I mean.
But two, I think if I had one fish to catch, it'd probably be waiting for a big tailing 13, 14 pound bonefish. I mean, bonefish, people take them for granted, but they don't. They are a really special animal.
Well, that's what Steve Huff says. He's been asked, if God said you could only fish for one fish the rest of your life, what would it be? He said it would be a bonefish.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think those real big bonefish are different animals than the 2 and 4 pound
Absolutely.
bonefish.
Oh, God,
no, absolutely. It's like,
So there's a difference there, right?
like you want to date hot chicks or not so hot. Simple analogy, right?
Very well said.
Let's go back to your writing briefly. You've had your work appear in Sports Illustrated, Playboy, Time, Esquire, Gourmet. You've been awarded a lot of awards. You've received from the movie Hoot. You won a Newbery Award, the Damon Runyon Award from the Denver Post Press Club, and you've received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Society of Newspaper Columnists. You've written like 48 books, a couple movies, Strip Tease and Hoot.
Yeah.
So
I didn't write the scripts, but the books.
But the books.
Yeah.
Great. Unbelievable work. 48 books or so?
Not that many, but it feels like that many. I don't know. I haven't counted them.
Okay.
I don't know how many.
Strip Tease. Come on. Did you ever see Demi Moore topless? I gotta ask. Come on.
I think most of the world has because of the movie. But was I on the set? Yeah, a couple of days I was on the set, and then
Did you ever pinch yourself? Come on, we got to go a little ugly.
I didn't. I'll tell you a true story that after the movie was done shooting, she was doing a cover shot for a magazine called George that John F. Kennedy Jr. published. It's a political magazine. She was going to be on the cover the same month that the movie came out, and it was a tie-in, and they wanted me to, and John Kennedy Jr., who I'd never met, called up and asked me if I'd come out to LA and do a quick interview with her that he could put on the inside of the thing. And I had a connection to him through my agent, and I said, they'll fly me out to LA. I said, I'm supposed to be trout fishing in North Carolina. It would just be a day or two late. I said, I'm only going to go for one day, and then you guys got to fly me, get me back to Asheville so I can go fishing. They said, oh, no problem. I took a red eye to California. I ended up at Oxnard somewhere, some photo studio, glam photo studio. I got a T-shirt on, I got jeans on, and I got my little notebook to do a 5-minute Q&A with Demi, who I knew from the set, and he'd always been very nice. But anyway, she's getting all done up. She's got like 8 people working on it. They're putting on regular makeup and body makeup because she's going to be Martha Washington, kind of a topless version of Martha Washington. Now, you don't find many photos of Martha Washington topless that to work from. So her people, her stylists are winging it, and then she's going to have a little shawl on and everything like that. So at the end, they decide they want me in the picture. They come in with a van. It goes on all day. I can't get out. I can't get my plane out. It's just one delay after another. I'm pissed off. I'm not happy. I'm fishing. I'm missing time on the water, even though you're getting to see that. So that's how demented the sport is. I was pissed off because I got to watch Demi Moore get body painted. Well, I'm looking at, I got an American Airlines flight. I got to get the fuck out of here. Anyway, so they said, you got to be in the picture with her. I said, they said, we're bringing you some clothes. And they said, what size do you wear in Armani? And this is a true thing. I said, what is Armani? I had no clue what Armani was. And they said, oh, God. So anyway, they get a suit. They pin me up in the back like David Byrne and, Talking Heads. They get my picture, put me in a picture with her, snap the picture. They yank me out of the picture, take me back to the dressing room. And I'm on, the shoot is going on. I'm back there and I hear this male voice say, hey, don't get any makeup on that suit. We got to take it back to Rodeo Drive. Okay. That's where authors, my point is that's the food chain for authors. Don't get any makeup on your suit. I got to take it back.
But now, what is Bad Monkey? It's going to be produced into...
Apple TV has done 10 episodes of a series, and it's going to be on in the... I don't know when this is going to air, but they're saying now in the fall of 2023 in a few months. Yeah, and it's based on the novel, and Vince Vaughn is in it. It's the same producer who did Ted Lasso and Shrinking. Bill Lawrence. He's a great guy, and he seems to have the magic touch. And he's fell in love with that book, and so he's had the book for a while, and he finally Apple finally gave it a green light. So they were filming in Big Pine and Key West, and in Miami near Crandon, they did a Bahamian house. This it takes place in the Bahamas, but you can't put a crew of 100 people on the island where there isn't any room. So they built a house, I think at Bill Bagg State Park or something, and it folds up. It looks like it's nice, but they can actually fold it up and move it from beach to beach, and I don't know. It's all Hollywood stuff.
Wow.
So, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm not writing any of the episodes, but they sent me most of the scripts, and it looks pretty good. But you know me, I'm a little bit I'm skeptical always, but they sunk a lot of money into it, so I hope it's good.
Was it surprising to you how big Hoot became and gotten? Because I remember in middle school, it was a mandatory reading. Read the book Hoot. We watched the movie. It was like, as a kid, that was the story.
I know, and I was shocked. I wrote that book as a one-off. I'd never written for young readers, and my editor asked me to do it, and I thought she was crazy. This is after Strip Tease and some of the crazier books. Skinny Dip had just come out. Books for grown-ups. You don't want to poison the youth of America with my writing. It was my reaction. And then I wrote this book because I had nieces and nephews that were about the age group, 10, 11, 12. And I wouldn't let them, obviously, read the grown-up books, the language and the situation. And so I thought, well, if nothing else, I'll do this book that I can give it to them so they see what I do for a living. And then I'm done on the kids' books. And I wrote Hoot, which was a page out of my child, Bob and I, out of our childhood, really, about those little burrowing owls. And then it became a thing. I was absolutely stunned when the Newbery Committee honored it. To me, it was just, at least there'll be something on a bookshelf that I don't feel nervous about letting the kids read. There's no, I always say, and the kids' books, there's no characters. I've been married 5 times and have a meth habit. I save those characters for the other stuff. But I was surprised in a happy way, and I still get so much mail about that book. And they teach it in schools. They teach it. Well, they have it in schools all over the country. Even now, it's been 20 years, and my nickname for the book is the annuity.
Right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Is there one book you're most proud of?
That's a good question. I think the book I have, the one of the adult novels I have probably the most affection for is Tourist Season, because it was the first one I did on my own. I'd done 3 with another novel that wasn't, they weren't satirical, supposed to be funny, but it was the first one where I just cut loose and said, what the hell, this is a story I want to write. If it gets published, great. And I think that I had more affection for that book, just because it's like your first time. And then Hoot certainly has become a favorite, just because the mail I'm sitting, first of all, Norwegians we don't have the sunniest personalities anyway. And so I'm already skeptical. I've been in the newspaper business my whole life. You can't get any more jaded than that. But then you get these letters from these kids who, from all over the place, not just from Florida, all over the country, who get so connected to the environmental. They love the outdoors so much. They love fishing. There's a lake that they go to in the summer. You hear these stories about how precious these wild places are to them, and they've all identified with the idea of what would happen if they got paved over and turned into a Walmart or something, and which was happening to the owls in the book.
Sure.
Because Bob and I went through that, and we watched them. It went, all these beautiful burrowing owls. They just came in, boom, bulldozed the nests, birds, everything. Mm-hmm. And you see that as a kid, you feel helpless. But again, selfishly, I got to write this book, and I got to write a whole new ending on it. And then it's okay. But these kids connected with it, and the mail is so touching, and they're so smart, and they're sharp. I thought, it means something. When you write something, you can tell really means something to readers. That's that's cool. It doesn't often happen, So I felt very grateful that I had the chance to do that.
What's up with your writing now?
Well, I've got a kid's book coming out in a couple months. It's set in Key West. It's called Wrecker, and it's about a kid who is descended from a line of old Key West salvage people, wreckers and things.
Oh, interesting.
And it's got an environmental angle with the cruise ships in Key West, and it's got a smuggling.
Oh, perfect.
A smuggling angle. And then I'm just working on another book for another demented tale for the grown-ups,
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm deep into that, but it's slow going. I don't find it get particularly easier as you get older. Everyone says, "Oh, this must be nothing to write a book." No, it's still torture.
It's hard.
It's torture.
Do you love it? You must.
I must, but you go into it's not a normal way to make a living. You go into a room. I have a little office in downtown. I go in the room. It's just four walls. There's absolutely nothing.
And I see you write with headphones.
I do. This started when I was living in the Keys, and I was by myself. It was after a divorce. I was living by myself, and I hired a construction crew from the Keys, silly me, to add a bedroom, do some renovations on that house on Florida Bay. But it was right above my head where they were tearing everything up, and so I was working in this spare bedroom, and the jackhammers and shit going on. So I started using shooting, earmuffs that you use for shooting. And it became this thing where now I can't write without it. Even though if it's dead silence outside, I still wear the damn things.
Interesting.
Writers are very peculiar.
Do you think you can hear your mind better when there's complete and total silence?
It might be so. It might be true, but I think it's just you get into these habits. I worked with a reporter a great writer named Barry Bierak, who went on to the New York Times and won all kinds of awards. But he sat behind me, and every day he'd come in from his assignment in the newsroom in the Herald. My desk was in front of him. Barry would come in. He was ready to write. I knew he was ready to write. Take off his watch, take off his ring, put it there. Take off his shoes, put them there in his socks, and sit there and bang, on deadline, just rip it out. But there was a ritual. And writers are just weird like that. They're like, well, I can't compare it to being a professional athlete, but athletes are kind of superstitious too. And fishermen especially are
fishing guides,
Yeah. If I have a terrible day on the water, I've got a hat on, hat's going in the garbage. Do you ever do that when you're fishing?
And I've told this story before, but I know you've never heard it. It was the last day of the Gold Cup, and I'm sorry for the audience that's listening going, I've heard the story before, but I got to tell you, Carl, because I'm not superstitious at all. And I think Chrissy was a little bit with, socks and shoes and stuff like that, but I've never been that way. So it's the last day of the Gold Cup, 5 days, and Kenny Collette yells over to me at the starting grid, about ready to shoot the gun. He goes, "Hey, Andy, you've got to go move your truck." I'm going, "What are you talking about?" I knew he was messing with me. He said, "Are you serious?" He says, "Yes, you're in dead last place. You're always in the top at the last day. You got to move your truck. You got a bad parking spot. You always park in the same spot." So I said, "Okay, really? Okay."
I get that.
So I told Timmy Hoover, I said, "Timmy, we got to go move my truck." And Timmy's now really upset. So I said, "I'm moving the truck." So we're motoring over to, the Lorelei there, jump out, dig my keys out of my bag. Takes a little bit. He's pissed. Move my truck like 3 blocks, come running back. And I say, "Timmy, it's the first really good day we've had. We've had bad weather. We've had fish fall off. This is the first good day. In the field is only 2 70-pound fish ahead of us. You find me the fish. I'm going to catch them. We're going to win." We had 5 bites, caught all five weight fish, and won the tournament.
Oh my God.
That's the first and only time I've ever been superstitious.
But see, I totally get that.
It works.
I totally get that. Because if I was doing well in a tournament or leading, I always parked in the same spot. I got the same sandwich.
Is that right?
Got the same hat, wore the same hat. We just had a whole protocol. And I'd never been superstitious before the tournaments, but then I started getting weird about it.
But I think what happens though, it clears your mind. Because you want to be comfortable.
Yeah.
With what you want to be totally comfortable. Whatever that means, you do the same thing. It's like putting on an old pair of shoes. That's home.
I'll tell you something that happened recently. I was down in my wife and I went down to Costa Rica, and Katie got her first sailfish. She got it on a spinning rod, but I've never fished for billfish on a fly. So they drag and they tease them up and everything. And 2 days go by. My friend catches once almost 100 pounds on fly. I haven't had a shot yet, not one. It's one of those days where you're not seeing very many. You see them free jumping, they're not coming by. So it's about 4:15, which in my mind, bottom of the ninth, right? 2 outs. I'm sitting there. But I had some back issues, so I had a brace that I put on sometimes if I'm fighting a decent-sized fish, a little Velcro thing. And then I'd been wearing the same sunglasses all day. And I know that we're going in soon. So I said, as soon as I take this brace off, the fish are going to come. I took the brace off. I purposely took off one pair. No difference between the sunglasses, by the way. Just different pair. Put them on. 5 minutes later, boom, bam. Get the fish. Got the sailfish.
It's crazy.
I know, but I believe it. I believe that I caused that to happen. That's how sick I am.
Are you like this on a daily basis in normal life? Or just fishing?
Mainly fishing. Just fishing.
And riding is only the headphones?
Riding is only the headphones. Sometimes there's music involved. This is how, even though I have headphones on, sometimes I feel like I have a certain playlist on in the background noise. There are some peculiar, but I think writers are it's such a weird profession. I mean, you're alone all the time. It's you. Right. You're go in a room with 400 blank pages and come out with a book in a year. Do you mind doing that? Just take it off. You go. Who does this for a living?
Is writer's block a real thing for you?
No, and that's because of the newspaper business. You couldn't have a job. If you had writer's block, you wouldn't last a week in a newsroom. So I learned to write when your life isn't going great, you're depressed, or you don't feel great, you feel kind of shitty about things. You just had to write. You go into work, here's your assignment. If you don't do it, you then have unemployment block. So, I learned to do it, and it helps now, with the novels too, because there are many days you don't feel funny. My books are supposed to be funny, and this stuff's going on. It may not be very funny in your life at the time, and it's not writer's block. It's just it's harder to get it out of first gear sometimes. But I go in almost every day. I'm literally every day of the week. Try to put in a couple hours. Drives Katie. Well, it doesn't drive her crazy. She understands it now. But it's just that when you create this world in a novel, these characters become family. They live in your head, for better or for worse. So if you're away from the manuscript or from the work too long, even like a week of not looking at and not interacting with the characters, you almost have to go back, start rereading from the very first chapter again.
To get reconnected.
And get the rhythm. In that sense, there is a similarity to fishing, and you know this. When you're on, there's a rhythm between you and the guide, and especially in tournaments. You're in sync. It just, now for writing, it probably takes me a little longer the older I get. And the other thing is, if you have a back that's messed up, sitting, this worst thing you do is sitting over a computer, right? The doctor will say, that's the worst thing you can do for your back. I said, okay, that's what I do for a living. So what do I do now? And it's basically suffer.
So there are some days where you sit down on your computer and you're fighting the story and whatnot, and you just can't get it out. Do you ever say, I'll just pick it up tomorrow, or do you fight it?
I know that at a certain point, and nowadays it's more in mid-afternoon. I used to be able to put in where you feel yourself tiring, and it's just, you look at a sentence you wrote and go, no, it's time to stop for the day. That's terrible. That's an awful piece of dialogue. Let's just stop, because you can put the words on the paper, but in your inner reader, your inner editor is going, that sucks, and it's time to quit, rest up. It's like the same, if you're fishing a long, hard day, and like you're cast out, like if you're on a river in Montana, and I love to fish for trout, rising trout, but at the end of the day, the cast doesn't look quite like it did at the beginning.
Yeah, right.
You keep hearing something behind whack. I just get tired. I think I just get tired. When you fished the tournaments, did you were you have adrenaline going until the line's out, or did you ever get
I was
tired?
pretty good.
Yeah.
I was exhausted come Saturday morning when the tournament was over, a 5-day tournament.
Yeah.
You're running 3 hours a day at 60 miles an hour. all the way down to Key West, sometimes rough water, and then you're hanging on and focusing, and you can't find a fish, and you have to keep drilling your eyeballs into that water. You got to find one.
Yep.
Even if it's just one, that one, you can catch that one fish, and you have to believe in yourself that all you need is one.
That's true, and I've talked to other anglers about it, and I know the guides who have fished with you told me the same thing, that you have. It's one thing to be able to cast beautifully. That's one thing, but I know people that can cast at a mile that really don't catch very many fish.
Yeah, sure.
Because casting at a mile is not what it's all about. It's about knowing what the fish are doing. You have to be plugged in to what these are prehistoric creatures, bonefish, tarpon. They're here way before we were, and they feed a certain way. They do certain things, and you know what they're doing in the water, the body language of the fish. All that's going into your head. It's not just, heaving it out. Well, that's pretty. That's 90 feet. Fish is at 60.
Right.
You're screwed. And I think the best anglers I know, and I know this is true of you, is you're looking at much more than just that fish. You're looking at everything going on. So the one thing I loved about the tournaments is it made me a better angler. In terms of that kind of, it made me a better angler, I think.
Mm-hmm. It demanded greatness from you. And I've always assessed tournaments, and people or anglers and guides. A great fisherman can catch the fish. Look, good fishermen can catch a lot of fish and big fish. Great fishermen can catch the fish that doesn't want to be caught. Great guides can find the fish that don't want to be found.
Yeah.
And like with you and Carl, or Timmy.
Yeah.
Timmy said that your focus and your sense of calm oversees anybody he's ever fished. He said, when you put the fly in the water, you can make that fish eat it better than anybody. You could feed fish better than anybody. And I've always assessed that. When you see a fish, you see that bonefish, you know you can catch him because you know what he's doing. You know what he wants.
Yeah, and I think maybe it comes from doing it as long as I have, but I also think I know you fish with guys like that. You have to have so much respect for the animal. You have enough respect that you know what it's doing, what it's like.
And what it wants.
What it wants. You got to educate yourself, and that's the cool part of it. I've heard the same thing about, you could make the tarpon eat on that ocean side, but nobody... everybody who's watching this who's never fished the ocean. I lived on Lower Manikin, but the picket line during tarpon season in tournaments, it's boat after boat after boat. These fish are, if they're northbound, they're seeing a fly every couple hundred yards,
right?
And they're seeing it go by them all this time. And then you got to convince one of them. It's been happening all the way since Key West. They've been putting up with this shit, and all of a sudden, one of them decides to eat one fly that one angler's been able to make. That's what makes that's what the great anglers could do. Mm-hmm. And the fish are so much more beaten up now by traffic than they were when I was a kid. I mean, the tarpon would come up and daisy chain around your boat. You could go to Valhalla and you could just sit there and the water would be watching like salmon coming all day long.
I know. But, interesting, you make mention of that. Even in the film Tarpon that was produced in 1974, they were talking then about there's too much boat traffic. They were talking then in that film about the pressure of people on the ocean.
Yeah.
In 74. 50-some years ago.
Yeah.
If they would only see it now.
Well, that's the beauty of your baseline.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, Nick. I mean... And my kids to some extent. My older son, I took him bonefishing for a time when he was 6 years old in a little skiff I had, and we're spinning rods. And I'll never forget, he was little, but he's not little now. But and I'm pulling him around in this little Starcraft shit, and he goes, "Dad, there's a permit tail." And I said, "Yeah, what are you talking? Yeah, just keep your eye out for bonefish." I was terrible at fishing. Dad, I'm not kidding. I look back. Now we didn't catch it, but the point is, he was already, and he's like that. And he's got better eyes than I do, and he's.
Well, Tim McGuane says you got the greatest eyes he's ever fished with.
Well,
how often did you find the fish before Timmy when you were fishing?
Not that often, but sometimes I do.
He also said that you're an unbelievable bait cast fisherman.
Oh, God. Listen, let me
Because
just...
we all tackle, you got to catch fish with all...
Yeah, and I did hook one on a bait casting rod once. But I learned, Bob and I grew up with spinning rods. I didn't learn to bait, and we fished for bass with bait cast. I never learned how. I'm in the Keys, and I finally get a bait caster, so go out to the dock, and to me, it's the thumb. And people can be very accurate, way accurate. Steve always wants me to learn if we're plug fishing for snook, because he's more accurate. And I said, I'm more accurate with this. But anyway, so we won one of the tournaments. We were ahead, and then there was a chance of us winning the whole thing if all I could do was catch. We caught him on fly, we caught him on baby. All I could do is catch one. Oh my God. And it's like landing 20 feet from those. So there was a little school of fish on behind where Mike Swerdlow used to live on Upper Matacumby, and they're going across a white spot, and they're going away. I got a little jig on too. Miraculously lands in front of them. When a fish goes over and eat it, just a release fish or something, I think. Anyway, I hook them. It's just a weird feeling because it's not making any noise. It's like, there's no fucking noise. And then Timmy goes, yeah, and of course the jig falls out. He goes, God damn, you suck at that fish. I know, I told you I suck at it. I can't do it. You said you suck. I said, I've never seen anybody cast like. I said, well, I never had a reason to do it. Anyway, no, that was a running joke, and I don't think we ever had a bait casting rod in the boat with us again after that. That was it. He just said, nope, don't even bring it. We're not even thinking about it. We're done. But now I have a question for you. When you fish now, and when we guys fish together, how much of it is the experience? By that I mean, now as I get older, it's more important to me to be out there. I'm not as competitive, and just I feel lucky to be there, and lucky if fish go by, and it's just the experience of being out in the water and not being bothered by boats and shit. I value that a lot more than I did when I was younger, I think.
I'm right with you.
I'm the same way too. Although I will say that I have more patience than you do. 100%. If we're on the ocean and the fish aren't swimming and it's been 30 minutes, he's pulling his hair out.
Look,
he's
I used to ski at 90 miles an hour. This is a hard thing to deal with.
So when you agreed with Carl there, I call BS on that.
No, but I am good.
Because you are still really competitive.
Well, yeah, it's a relative thing.
It's relative. But you'll pause every once in a while and watch the sun go down.
I love watching him fish.
Yeah, I feel the same about my kids. Yeah.
I really do. Do I need to catch them? Yeah, I like to catch them, but I'm not nearly like we once were. It's like I used to kill myself out there. I quit fishing tournaments because I lost the perspective of the journey.
Yeah.
The journey is everything. I just love getting in the boat and tying flies and all that. And I'd lost that when towards the end when I was fishing tournaments. I was just expecting myself to win everything, and all of a sudden it got to be like distorted. It's like, this is stupid.
Yeah, and you'd done everything there was to do, and I think that also has an effect. I mean, what else were you going to win, and how many times you're going to win it? And but if you get a chance to be in a boat with your kid, or in my case, my wife has been learning to fly fish, and she's into bonefish in a big way, but she's never caught a tarpon. So that's going to happen someday. But I get more joy out of, I fish with Linville sometimes. You had him on the show. It was a great interview, sometimes in Key West, and we trade off on the bow. I'll sit there and watch that guy cast.
Unbelievable.
I've never seen anybody throw a fly rod like him.
No, no, I haven't either. And he'll say, okay, it's your turn. I'll say, just stay up there a little longer, because I'm trying to study. And he is a big guy, but just try to watch the rhythm and the loop. You try to piece together, what does he do that I can't do? And I think the answer is everything.
Well, also, let's not forget how big and strong he is.
Yeah,
so when he takes that rod and he moves from here to there, the power band is like 10 times what we have. We have no chance of holding 90 feet of line in the air.
No, what's amazing too is that he doesn't have any fly line out of his rod. He just has the leader out of his rod when he's waiting, and in 2 false casts he'll shoot at 90 feet.
How do you create line speed with the leader?
When he had me waiting one day for permit, I must have had, I'm not lying, 40 feet of fly line, because I didn't want to have to do all this at one pump, so I'm dragging this. And then, you got water on the line and everything, but I couldn't go straight from the leader. I need a little bit of weight.
I always
Us too, yeah.
I need 9 feet of fly line up out of my rod tip, just to bend it when I just start to get into the water.
Yeah, he's crazy. But that's what I mean. I think in the old days, I would have been fighting for every minute on the bow. I would have had, but when you watch, I feel like I'm learning something. I don't know if you, and I feel like you probably learned something watching Nicky.
Every day.
Yeah, and that's what makes it fun.
And the same thing, yeah, I love watching you fish as well. I always told people, I said, I learn the most when I'm on the back of the boat watching you fish, because I'm a visual learner.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're right behind my shoulder telling me what to do, I'll fall apart. But if I watch you and try to implement that when it's my turn on the bow, I'll learn more quickly.
It's funny, when I was ski racing, at the end of the day, a coach could tell you, this is how I want you to tip your ski on edge, or this is where your line should be delayed a little bit longer. So what he's expressing in words, I have to, relate that. And how am I going to decipher his words? But if you have a videotape, and every day we used to start videotaping our training runs, he would say, see that right there? And now I could see it.
Yeah.
And when we're fishing, that's exactly what we're doing.
And I think after you do it enough, there's so much instinct and muscle memory involved. But like when we would fish the bonefish tournaments, and Timmy's got eyes like this too. If we were passing a flat and there was a boat up in this casting, I knew if it was your dad casting. It was just such a thing of beauty. And there's a lot of people that can cast pretty well, but you can tell when you're, and there's such a beauty to it, of people doing it well. It's such a lyrical kind of thing to watch someone do that.
It's an art form.
It is an art form,
for sure.
And I still get I'm furious at myself for messing up. I cast it. And I'd still mess up.
When you were fishing, was there much conscious thought? I mean, when you see the fish, you know when and where and what to do. You don't even think about it.
No,
don't even think.
No, it was all reflex, and my eyes just never left the fish. And it was just a question of getting. You felt all connected with your,
for sure,
holding these rods your whole life. And it's just okay. Is he going left, right? And I would say to Timmy, but the great thing, and when Timmy and I would fish, and same with Bob, we would pull along. In a minute, I felt the boat go left or right.
Where is he?
I'd say, what do you look? Okay,
Where
there
is
he
he?
is. Yeah,
he's
already. You got to be that kind of in sync. I think to be successful in tournaments, you and the guy, you really have to be connected.
It's a refined machine.
Yeah, and it has to be kind of instinctual, don't you? If you're you're framicating around,
that's what he said. You're framicating,
and then you're just like,
no, there's no chance.
I have a friend of mine who's a guide in Montana, Bo Strathman. He always says, we're on the Missouri or something, and I'll fuck him. He goes, I look up at the front of the boat, and he goes, oh, you got shit on your fingers again, don't you? And I said, yeah, I got shit on my fingers. It's a great saying, but it's exactly what you feel like. Oh, come on. And everybody gets excited. I know you're down there, and so when you see you've got 140-pound fish swimming across, you're not normal if you're not nervous.
Sure. No.
And I remember I saw an interview with Nicholas once, and he goes, "You don't seem nervous out there." He goes, "Are you kidding me?" He says, "If you're not nervous, you're not human, and you're not going to win. Mm-hmm. Everybody's nervous.
You have to be, But interesting, we did an interview with Darren Clark recently. He won the British Open, and this last year he won the Senior British, and I played golf with him. We had him on the podcast, and I asked him, "How do you finish a Grand Slam event at the buzzer? You're coming down the last 3 holes. How are you not so nervous that you start guiding your shot and you miss your shots and this and that?" And he said an interesting thing. He said, "The great ones don't care." And I found that very interesting. And I think it was that how I interpret that statement is that when you've won so much, the intensity is there, but you've refined your ability to get through that barrier, if there is such a barrier,
Right.
which a lot of people can't get through that barrier to make the shot.
I think that's a good analogy. I think that they're all, they're just
You just make it work.
they just make it work. And that's why it really separates in athletics as well as in fishing, and I do. There's a rhythm and an instinct to all great things. There's an artistry to golf. It drove me crazy, but there is. I mean, there's just, you can't think. If you're thinking about the mechanics,
You're toast.
and this is even if you're just out fun fishing for bonefish. I remember one time I was fishing out by the Petersons by myself at night, and I had my fly rod set in the bow of the boat, and the fly is there, and I pull it, and there's this big tail comes up, just coming down the bank. So I had a little holder. I put my pole in the hole. I ran up to the front of the boat, and I slipped or something. I picked up the rod, and I dropped it, and the fly, the barb of the fly went into that vein right there. Boom. Now there's blood. And of course, now I've got to get back to the house. So I took off my shirt and I wrapped it around there. And of course, the fish is blown off by this point. But I was so intent and watching. I was trying to do everything by memory, like pick the fly rod up and the kind of by memory, and just already stripping. And the fly got me right. They ended up at Mariners. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to give you a shot to take that out." And the injection was 10 times worse. I would have just kept the fly in there if I would have known. I went up through the roof on the thing. But the boat looked like I butchered a hog in it. By the time I got back to that, there was so much freaking blood in the boat. But you get that insane thing, like that's a tailing bone. Boom.
Such big,
you know what I mean? It's
big juice.
Isn't it? Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Do you miss the tournaments?
No. Not at all.
I don't really either.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
But the fishing hasn't gone anywhere.
No, of course I still love that. But I fished tarpon tournaments, and I'd fished a few bonefish tournaments. But for 14 years I did it, and then I quit.
That's a lot. Yeah.
And then I quit for 4 years. And then Fordyce asked me to fish one more, and I fished that with him. And we happened to win, and he said, "Okay, we have to defend, right?" I said, "No, I'm done. I'm out." I love that time. I cherish it greatly. But no, I had my time, and it's time to be with Nikki, and
Now you fish the tournament. He's fishing the
a
tournaments,
little
right?
bit.
I stopped fishing. I haven't fished them in 2 years.
Oh.
But I fished 8 years prior in the Golden Fly and 1 year in the Don Holly. I never fished the Gold Cup. But I hope one day.
He did well. He got second and third in those. And I told him, I said, "Look, if you're only going to fish one tournament," he was only fishing one, you got to fish the Gold Cup.
Yeah.
But until you get the right guy that you want to fish with, wait.
Yeah, I'm in no rush. But
But you have the experience. I mean, you know what the scene is, and that's
for
a lot
sure.
of it.
Yeah.
The adrenaline's real, and when that gun goes off in the morning, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all good.
They're great critters, and I always tell people, fishing is definitely not what it was 20 years or 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but they're going to outlast us.
Yeah.
We're going to incinerate ourselves on this planet long, and there'll be fish tailing,
for sure.
out on the Cape Flat again someday. No jet skis.
Well, we've covered a huge spectrum. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, I'm just I'm very flattered that you all came to talk to me about this silly stuff. I mean, it becomes a passion, but I think it's a component to staying sane. And I don't think it's just a thing for kids, but I think a lot of great fishermen I know started when they were young, started as kids, and it carries you the rest of your life. And the other great thing that it does is it gives you a great excuse to hang out with your own kids. If they love it too, that's a tremendous gift that you've given to them.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Carl.
Well, thank you,
It's been
Andy.
a tremendous pleasure.
All right, I had
Carl,
fun too.
great to meet you.
You too, Nick.
Yeah. Thanks, pal.
See you, buddy.
Yeah.
When I saw it's West Side Story, when I saw it's just a